To be modeling, I never would have thought that it would take so much time, that I would be a model for so long.
Imagine Paris in the 80s. The Chanel runway echoes with the click-click of heels. The audience, eyes glowing with anticipation, waits for the tall, elegant girl stepping out from behind the velvet curtains. She appears, refined, but never overdone. A beauty so serene, so effortless, it makes you pause instead of cheer. That was Inès de La Fressange, the first French model ever to sign an exclusive contract with Chanel. She embodied Coco Chanel's spirit, sharp, understated, impossibly chic. Vogue once called her the ideal French woman. And yet, after years as the face of Chanel, Ines was abruptly fired in 1989, right at the peak of her career. The reason? She accepted the role of representing Marianne, France's national symbol, while Karl Lagerfeld dismissed it as bourgeois, provincial, and banal. In one move, she became the muse who was cast out of her own empire. That single clash was enough to turn Ines into a fashion legend. And it still leaves us with a question. When staying true to yourself means being seen as different, is the price ever worth it? Ines was born in 1957 in Gassin, in the south of France, a picture-perfect place of lavender, olive trees, and the quiet of old aristocracy. Her father, Marquis André de La Fressange, was a true French aristocrat, an investor and banker. Her mother was an Argentine fashion model who had worked for Givenchy. With a background like that, everyone assumed Ines would grow up cushioned by Parisian high society. Boarding school, a marriage to a businessman, and a quiet life wrapped in velvet. But from early on, she was different. Ines didn't care about full skirts or lipstick. She loved jeans, men's shirts, and a loosely knotted scarf with a touch of nonchalance. When asked how it felt to be an aristocratic young lady, she just laughed. I don't know. I only know I hate rigidity. At 15, she was already 1.80 meters. Classmates called her a walking flagpole. Her looks didn't fit the classic French template. Thin rips, high cheekbones, a gaze that was half smile, half smirk. It was a beauty that refused easy definition. She had no intention of becoming a model. In fact, she once wanted to study design or work in publishing. But fate shifted when she did a test fitting for a small Paris designer. The seamstresses couldn't take their eyes off the way she wore a plain white shirt, as if it had been made for her. In 1975, at 18, Ines officially signed with a modeling agency and immediately drew attention for talking too much. Back then, the model rulebook was simple: be silent, be beautiful, be obedient. But Ines refused to be a walking mannequin. She voiced opinions about the clothes, spoke up when the makeup was too heavy, and regularly adjusted what the stylist put on her. Soon, she was nicknamed the talking mannequin. Ironically, that label became her advantage, the very thing that later won over Karl Lagerfeld, a man who preferred working with women who could think for themselves over girls who only nodded. And just like that, the journey of a lanky girl not made for showbiz quietly began, a path that would turn her into a new symbol of France. Paris, early 1980s. While the fashion world was still obsessed with the American look, sultry, big hair, full lips, Karl Lagerfeld, the newly appointed creative director of Chanel, was searching for something else. A French girl. No glitter, no plastic, no chasing trends. He needed a symbol for Chanel's new chapter, and he chose Ines. In 1983, Inès de La Fressange officially became Chanel's very first exclusive model, an unprecedented move at the time. On the runway, she didn't need theatrics, just a stride, straight posture, that sly Parisian gaze, and the room fell silent. Karl called her Coco Reborn. The press dubbed her Inès na Rebelle, the rebel with Parisian elegance. Vogue wrote she was Chanel without needing to explain Chanel. Inès was never the fussy type. She wore oversized shirts, flat shoes, rarely heavy makeup, but that very nonchalance made her the embodiment of French chic, effortless, clever, a little defiant. From Chanel, she went on to front Yves Saint Laurent, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Christian Dior, and graced dozens of covers for Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar. By 1989, she was chosen by the French government to be the new face of Marianne, the national symbol of the Republic of France. Inès was no longer just a supermodel, she was a national treasure, a fashion icon turned into the literal face of France. But from that very moment, her career entered troubled waters. Karl Lagerfeld, the man who once called her his muse, did not approve. To him, a Chanel model becoming Marianne was too common, too bourgeois. They stopped speaking for weeks. A month later, Karl ended the contract. No announcement, no goodbye. Chanel had fired its own icon. The media called it the most ink-spilled breakup in French fashion. But Inès, as always, just shrugged. I didn't cry. I just walked away. After leaving Chanel, Ines stepped away from the spotlight with an unhurried stride. No interviews, no blaming Karl, no attempt to reclaim the spotlight. The French called her the lady who knew when to leave, but deep down, it was a silence that wasn't easy to bear. While her fellow supermodels crossed over to America, chasing fame from runways to Hollywood screens, Ines chose to stay in Paris, and she did something no one expected. She launched her own fashion label, Inès de La Fressange. Her dream was to share the spirit of Parisian chic with the world. Elegant but never pretentious, refined but never rigid. The first boutique opened in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, Paris's artistic quarter. Her designs mirrored her own essence: crisp white shirts, soft knits, tailored trousers, pieces that followed time, not trends. But business was nothing like the runway. A few years later, after a complicated investment deal, she lost control of the very brand she had created. Worse still, she was legally banned from using her own name for any commercial purpose. Inès de La Fressange, the name she was born with, was now a brand she no longer had the right to touch. No runway, no Chanel, no label. The woman once celebrated as the very symbol of France was suddenly on the outside of fashion, looking in. By the early 2000s, Ines had almost vanished from the media. No fashion weeks, no magazine covers, no runway cameos. Instead, she chose a quiet life with her 2 daughters, reading, gardening, and scribbling little notes about the French art of living beautifully. In one of her rare public appearances, she simply said, "Fashion moves fast, but I've never liked running." In 2009, nearly a decade after disappearing from the spotlight, Inès returned, not to the runway, but to the bookshelves. Her slim volume, Parisian Chic, written and illustrated by herself, instantly became a global phenomenon. It wasn't a fashion memoir. It wasn't a business manual. It was simply a witty, lighthearted guide showing women how to dress well, live well, and stop chasing anyone at all. The book sold over 1 million copies and was translated into more than 20 languages. With its humorous, effortless voice so unmistakably Inès, it transformed her into the living embodiment of a lifestyle. Elegant, independent, understated. That same year, Karl Lagerfeld, the man who had once severed ties with her, invited her back to Chanel's front row. A photograph of the two shaking hands after a haute couture show exploded across the media. A reunion without apology, without explanation. Just 2 icons who had once belonged together and still understood each other without words. Not long after, Uniqlo, the global brand built on minimalism, invited her to collaborate as a designer. Her debut collection sold out across Tokyo, Milan, Paris. Her pieces, crisp white shirts, linen dresses, light blazers, were were just like her. Never loud, but impossible to ignore. Ines didn't need a comeback. She had never left herself. She was never the most viral model, never the most controversial face. But for millions of women, she became a symbol of a simple truth. Elegance doesn't need validation. It only needs presence. She remains the ideal vision of the modern French woman. Intelligent, composed, opinionated, with nothing to prove. Younger models call her cool, but it's the kind of cool that can't be copied. Effortless, unforced, never performed. No one can replicate Ines's shrug, just as no one can wear a blazer and make others want to live like her without saying a single word. There's a photograph taken in 1984. Ines stands by a Parisian window, wearing a slightly wrinkled white shirt and cream khakis, hands in her pockets, gaze drifting into the distance. No posing, no heavy makeup, no staging. And in that moment, she was so beautiful that fashion itself seemed to fall silent. Inès de La Fressange never tried to become an icon. She was simply a woman who knew who she was, lived about truth, and let everything else follow. She was fired at the height of her career, stripped of the right to use her own name, pushed outside the race of contemporary fashion. But Inès never needed to run, because what people remember about her is not an explosion, but a rare, quiet grace that almost no one can imitate. She never needed the spotlight. She was the light, soft enough to warm, yet never blinding.